Hello and welcome to Build a Bot, the show that helps you build your Power Virtual Agents chatbot and use it effectively. My name's Matt Farmer, as always, with you, and I also have with me a couple of colleagues. So today, you've seen him before on this show, is Abhi Rathinavello.
Hi everyone, and hi Matt. So happy to be back on a Build a Bot episode. Sorry, my video is not on because I'm kind of in a remote situation. Uh, However, we have a very exciting guest and session planned for you today. So I have with us Marc Schweigert from the ALM Accelerator team, and I know you guys have already must have heard a lot of buzz about the ALM Accelerator and what they're doing. And today's session, Mark has kindly agreed to come to us and talk to us about how you can leverage this ALM accelerator for your own PVA project so that you can have a very seamless ALM experience with your chatbot, whether it is maintaining the versions of those chatbots or deploying them in a very seamless one-click way. So with that, over to you, Mark, to take over.
I was going to say,
Yes.
Mark, do you want to introduce yourself? I suppose
Sure.
Abhi's done a pretty great job, actually, but do you want to tell us a bit more about what you do in the team?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Abhi. It's first of all, it's exciting to be here. I've had the pleasure of being on Paracat Live, but this is my first Build-A-Bot experience, and so I appreciate the opportunity. I am a program manager. I'm a colleague of Matt and Abhi's on the Power Customer Advisory team, and I have a background in a passion for application lifecycle management well before this thing we call the Power Platform had application lifecycle management, but I've actually been doing application lifecycle management with what we now call the Power Platform since 2011, when the engine that drives ALM in the Power Platform that's part of Dataverse was still part of Dynamics CRM. And so, I'm excited to share a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing, trying to make ALM more approachable for people building solutions with the Power Platform.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mark. I suppose my first question, let's kind of level set here. Our audience are developers and architects who are building out PVA chatbots, and it's I'm new to this, and I've been told, right, sort out our ALM strategy. What do I need to know? What's the basics of application lifecycle management when I'm talking about Power Virtual Agents?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I think we get this question often with the different usages of the Power Platform, right? Like, how do I do ALM for PVA? How do I do ALM for Canvas apps, et cetera? And the answer is universal, right? It's that you start with a technology we refer to as solutions, that the engine it lives within Dataverse, but it is effectively the ALM engine for the Power Platform, right? And so you have to start with understanding solutions and how to use them, right? And for those who are familiar with them, or for those who aren't, right? Like, literally, you can take a bot, you can take a Canvas app, you can take a flow, and you can add it to a solution, which is a logical container. And then you can export it from one environment and you can import it into another environment, right? And if you do everything right, the thing that you built in the one environment works in the other environment, right? You're able to move your application from one environment to another. Now, the reality is it gets very nuanced as you go from levels of simplicity in what you're building in the Power Platform to levels of complexity, right? You can build a very simple Canvas app over SharePoint. You can also build a very complex, solution with Dataverse tables, model-driven apps, Canvas apps, bots, Power Automate, and go on and on and on, right? You can put .NET code inside them to create plugins. You can build PCF components, right? And so as your complexity grows, manually moving things from one environment to another becomes harder and harder. And, having automation to reduce the human error related to that manual work becomes extremely valuable.
Fantastic. And just to clarify, I mean, you said it there, solutions are a special thing. That, I mean, they're kind of the container that all your assets go into, right? So when we talk about solutions here, we're not talking, the esoteric term. We're talking a thing in the Power Platform that manages
That's right.
for you.
It's a concept. It's a thing that you build in the maker experience, make.powerapp.com, flow experience as well. And it's also an engine behind the scenes that takes that thing that you're packaging up and essentially distributes it across effectively what is the microservices architecture behind Power Platform, right? And so while it's not a one-to-one comparison, I often tell people who are familiar with technologies like Azure, if you know what Azure Resource Manager is, right? You know ARM templates, the definition of the thing that you're going to provision in Azure, and then the ARM engine that takes that definition and then goes and creates all of those resources in Azure. Solutions are conceptually the same thing, except typically in Azure Resource Manager, you're provisioning the infrastructure that then you deploy your application on top of. In Power Platform, you're essentially doing both together, right? The solution contains provisions underlying infrastructure that your application needs, as well as the actual application on top of it.
Understand. So if we're talking, so again, go back to my hypothetical person. I mean, I understand what solutions are, and what do I do next? What do I have to go and get ready to make sure this all works and I can automate everything, and it just one click, all my stuff gets deployed everywhere? Or is it not?
So it's a great question. Fundamentally, everything that you can do to automate the platform exists behind an API, right? So if you can write code, you can execute PowerShell or any automation engine technology that can call a REST API. You can automate whatever you want with the Power Platform. Now, realistically, very few people do that. Most people who are doing application lifecycle management use some sort of technology like Azure DevOps or GitHub, right? Or other technologies that drive automation around application lifecycle management. And most people who are building applications want to have the source code of their application available to them, right, as part of that process. And so what we've done is we've built something called the ALM Accelerator for Power Platform that today uses Azure DevOps and Azure DevOps automation technology called pipelines, right, to enable you to do everything from getting your solution into source control to building and deploying that solution across multiple environments. Enables very simple ALM as well as more advanced ALM for people who are familiar with technologies like Git and submitting pull requests and continuous integration and continuous delivery, right? And so that's one of the interesting things about the platform is it needs to enable everything from the citizen developer to the professional developer to work the way that they want. And that's what we've tried to achieve with the ALM Accelerator for Power Platform.
Understand. And we'll get the link put in the show notes.
And there's also a PowerCat live session we can link to as well. That'll give people a very brief overview. So we won't, repeat, what we talked about in that session.
So just to dig into that a little bit more, how do I know I've been on sessions with you and Abhi as well, where we've been with customers and you've been talking through this. What should I do today to get started? I go and create the solution. What do I need to know?
Yeah, it's absolutely fundamentally about solutions, right? So you go into make.powerapps.com, you create a solution, you add your Power Platform components to that solution, whether it be a bot, a flow. There are things that we have that are ALM friendly, like connection references and environment variables that then get used by Power Automate flows, for example, that get called from a bot to make sure that as you move from one environment to another, you can use a different connection in the target environment or point to a different URL in the target environment, that kind of stuff. So you want to leverage all of those core ALM enabling capabilities, right? But from that point, what you want to do is to start to introduce this automation. Now we have hands-on labs for what we call the Power Platform build tools for Azure DevOps, right? Which are a set of Azure DevOps tasks that allow you to use Azure DevOps to automate all these things we're talking about. And we also have GitHub Actions for Power Platform that do the same thing that the Azure DevOps tasks do, but for GitHub, right? Using GitHub's CI/CD technology or continuous integration and continuous delivery technology. And so what we've heard, and part of the reason we wrote the accelerator from customers, we've heard that the hands-on labs get them started, but they still don't really know how to build real world ALM on top of those building blocks. And in fact, our team also builds the Center of Excellence Starter Kit. And so the thing that we're talking about, the ALM Accelerator for Power Platform, is literally the pipelines, the Azure DevOps pipelines and tools, namely a Canvas app that automates a lot of the context switching between make.powerapps.com or the FlowMaker experience, the bot experience, et cetera, and Azure DevOps. And so it sort of serves as the glue between those two. We had to build all this stuff ourselves to do more easy button ALM. And so basically what we've done is we've taken all that, we've packaged it up, and we've shared it with other people. And so you don't have to spend the months that we spent building out very robust YAML files. We've got upwards of 40 YAML files that enable all the various ALM related automation scenarios that we have in our accelerator. You don't have to do that. You can just install what we built, or you can look at it, learn from it, and bring it into your own pipelines. And then on top of that, we are working on enabling this for GitHub Actions for Power Platform as well. The accelerator today only works with Azure DevOps, but as of about a month since this recording, the GitHub Actions for Power Platform now have reached parity with the Azure DevOps tasks. So now that all the things that we've been doing in Azure DevOps, you can actually do with GitHub as well.
So to be devil's advocate here, because I've certainly had this discussion with customers, I'm really focusing on value. Power Platform gives me the tools so I can build this with low code. I want to just get something deployed. Why shouldn't I leave the ALM pieces and just do it manually? Why shouldn't I just do that now, and then ALM could be something I do later in the process?
Yeah, I would say for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think it's actually perfectly reasonable for some of the most simple applications that you're building in the default environment, right? That is only built by you and used by a handful of people, and you can go in there and use publishing and that sort of stuff, and that's perfectly fine, right? You don't have a need for ALM, and I by no means am suggesting that everybody needs ALM, but it's like ALM is one of those things that you need it when you start to feel the pain it solves the problem for, right? And so I would say, as your application grows in complexity, there is more things you want to do, like ingest data in downstream environments and do a lot of different things in your process that is very human error prone. And so the whole point of automation in general is to reduce human error. So if you are experiencing human error in moving your applications from one environment to another, that's reason number one, right? Source control gives you, because you can take a solution and you can do what we call unpacking it, you effectively can see the quote unquote source code, which is really more metadata that defines all the components of your application, but it's in a arguably human readable format, JSON files, XML files, it's YAML files, etc. But you can get that in a source control system. And so now, as you're checking things or committing things into a source control system, you can see line by line what's changed in your application across bots, topics, tables, Canvas apps, screens, Power Automate flows, etc. And there's a lot of value as your application gets much more complex to have that level of visibility on changes over time. And so I would say automation and cracking open the black box that is low code and having visibility into all the finer grained pieces of it.
Fantastic. Yeah, being able to do a diff of what actually happened, right? And it also, give developers, IT departments that bit of comfort. Actually, is that I can see what happened, I can see what changed.
Absolutely, it's that visibility. But the diff, and I use it a lot. Like we all make mistakes, right? And even in when you save and you can undo a mistake in a point and click low code experience, it's kind of hard to kind of see the differences. Canvas apps, for example, you kind of go to this piece of code, that piece of code. I go back to the source code all the time when I paint myself into a corner. I just go look at my previous commit and I go, okay, that's what my function looked like then. It's what it looks like now. Let me go learn from what I had and what's not working, and to help me debug the problem and get to a place where the new thing I'm building is working again, right? So there's a lot of value just going back in time and seeing it a very unfiltered way, right? A non-black box way of everything that changed as your applications get complex. And I think that's the key point. My advice to people is always, don't force complexity in automation and all that stuff until you need it. But as you're building more complex applications, you soon realize that you need it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I would say there is quite often people say, well, look, this is going to take me an amount of time to set up. But normally, if you do that early enough in the process, you get that time back and more. Right. Because, as you're developing, you're pressing a button, automating the process so that you're not, doing it manually. And you only got to mess it up once.
Yeah, that's what I think
get the time back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's what a lot of people refer to as the DevOps tax, right? Yeah. Or whatever term you want to use, which is they give up on it because they don't realize the benefit of it yet. But once they hit that inflection point, right, where the investment that they put into all that automation really starts to pay off, they never want to live without it, right? But too many people still give up because it's hard to get up and running. And candidly, it's still harder than I think I would like it to be. And as a product group, we would like it to be in the platform. And that's why the accelerator exists today. And then we will continue to see innovations in the platform to make in-product ALM easier. But ultimately, it's about realizing that benefit and reducing the human error.
Fantastic. Abhi, do you want to jump in? I've been talking a lot.
So thanks, Matt. So Mark, one of the questions which I had for you was like, a lot of the existing PVA customers are brand new to Power Platform, in the sense they have not built any Power Apps or Power Automate. Probably PVA is their first introduction to the Power Platform. So as they are going to adopt this accelerated kit, is there any nuances that they need to be aware of specific to PVA? That will help them to adopt this.
It's a great question. So I think when it comes to building bots with PVA outside of using additional components of the platform, that's where things are pretty seamless, right? It's when you start to do things like extend your bot and use Power Automate flows that then talk to Power Automate connections, right? To then call out to another service, whether it be a third-party service, through an out-of-the-box connector, or maybe even the HTTP connector, right, to go talk to an API, for example, that we don't have an out-of-the-box connector for. It's when those Power Automate flows, for example, have used custom connectors, right, as another example. And then there's also scenarios where as you move your overall solution that uses not just a bot, but those other things, and there is data in the backend system, right, that you're using, oftentimes Dataverse in the context of a lot of Power Platform solutions, right, that you need to move data into those downstream environments as you enhance your application, right? You create some lookup data in Dataverse, and it's not in the target environment. So as you go through your ALM process, you need to get that data in there, right? And so you need to, for example, make sure you're using connection references from your flows. When you make HTTP calls, use environment variables, right? When you're creating custom connectors, use the newly released in the last week since this recording feature of custom connectors that then leverages environment variables, right? And this is also that the state of your dev environment versus the state of your test environment versus the state of your production environment, for example, is respected across that automation and movement. And that's the key thing, because if you've hard-coded a URL to SharePoint, or you've hard-coded a URL to an external API, and you move to your dev environment, or I'm sorry, your test or your prod environment, then you have to manually go into that downstream environment to make changes. By using these facilities, you can now automate everything end to end, including bringing data into those downstream environments. And we've got examples, reference implementations, and all the functionality built out in our pipelines to show you how to do that in the ALM Accelerator.
So Mark, this all sounds really great. Have you got anything you just want to show us to make this more real and show us what the call to action is?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me bring up my desktop here. I think the first thing I'll call out is this blog post that we have on the Power Apps blog. We're working on getting something cross-posted to some of the other blogs as well, but for right now, it's on the Power Apps blog. And it's essentially announcing or introducing our ALM accelerator for Power Platform. So all those nuances about PVA that I talked about are already embodied in this accelerator, but it is built on top of Azure DevOps today. If you want to do the same kinds of things with GitHub ahead of us introducing GitHub support in our ALM accelerator, I'll show you where you can go for that as well. But before I do that, I just want to point out that I have a Power Platform solution here, right, that has chatbot subcomponents. It has a Cloudflow and connection references. It has some Canvas apps. It has Dataverse tables, right? And I also have a public GitHub repo that not only contains the source code for what you just saw in make.powerapps.com, right, in this GitHub repo that we'll share you a link to, it also has example GitHub workflows, which is GitHub's version of what Azure DevOps calls pipelines, that automates a lot of what we just described. And so effectively, this is our early work in progress of porting our Azure DevOps pipelines to GitHub workflows. And I've been using, coincidentally, thanks to Abhi, I've been using a solution that uses Power Virtual Agents as the solution to exercise this automation. And so all of this will be publicly available for people to review and use themselves.
That is fantastic, Mark. Thank you. I think it's been a feast of information this session. There's so much you've covered in such short time. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure people tuning in are going to find this incredibly helpful.
Absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mark.
I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you found that super useful. I say there's lots of links in the notes below. Please put your comments in the chat. We'll be monitoring that and hopefully answer any questions. Like and subscribe as always. But just to say thanks from me, Abhi.
So thank you, Mark, for joining us today. This was a wealth of information, and this is exactly what our customers are looking for from the PVA side, how to make their chatbot deployment seamless and painless, so that they can attain that holy grail of one-click deployment. And with this information which you provided today, I'm very confident that they can get there. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll see you next time on Build-A-Bot. Thanks.